Beth is the only female worker at the warehouse of a sausage company. After carrying boxes for a living, she comes home to her mother, Ada. The process of choosing which movie to watch stretches itself across eternities until something is finally put up. If the movie is good, Beth watches it till the end, and if not, well, then she follows her mother into the realms of sleep. In short, Beth is having the most exciting life possible. She is having so many adventures that if Gandalf the Grey appeared behind her doors, he would just keep going. No more adventures are needed with Beth and Ada. One of the male workers at the warehouse, Beck, is having a lot of fun with the company messages when Beth gets out to take a breather. She seems suffocated here, but outside, life is just a tiny bit better. A blonde girl is standing in the distance, screaming on her phone. As it seems, her boyfriend is controlling, and she is fighting back for her freedom. Beth overhears her conversation and spectates as she expresses her anger with every muscle of her body. When her presence is noticed, she feels as if she violated somebody else's privacy, so she gets back to work. Later that evening, we are introduced to other members of Beth's family. Her father seems to have been an honorable citizen of the U.S. He is not deceased, he was once a veteran. Beth also has a brother who's drowning in his own art projects and is unable to take his driver's license test because of it. Sometimes he even forgets to eat, but what he never forgets is to ask her sister to close the door on her way out. Beth is a sister. What do you think she does? The bleak, dense nothingness that is her life keeps suffocating her the next afternoon at work. As her male co-employees are having the time of their lives, she comes outside again and is suddenly approached by the same woman she said yesterday. As it turns out, her name is Kendra, and her favorite phrase is, "Oh my God." She uses it in almost every sentence and rolls her eyes toward her forehead every time she does so. She also loves talking about herself and drinking after 12-hour shifts. She could use one right now, so if Beth isn't deceased or asleep after Kendra's long monologue, she could tag along as well. Naturally, everything is better than going back inside the warehouse. Additionally, she seems to be drawn to this person. Her touch feels like something from outer space, warm and wondrous at the same time. Tense as always, Beth tries to present herself as a loose individual in the bar, but it's the same as if a puma tried to be a house cat. It just looks a bit unnatural. While drinking together with Kendra, she receives questions about her job and realizes that she has never ever talked this much about it in her life. She even mentions the light sexual that she goes through every day. That evening, she is seen at Kendra's apartment. After fixing the Wi-Fi and seeing her new friend, half nude, a glimpse of a bright smile appears on her face for the first time in this story. Clearly, this girl has had a wonderful effect on her. On the flip side, the fixing of Wi-Fi has had an even better effect on Kendra. The girl gets so drawn by some TV show that she forgets to walk her guest to the door. Beth cooks some pesto rigatoni later that night, but the next day, she basically cannot get herself to eat it. There is no way in heaven she has time for that, because a certain individual named Kendra appears at her workplace to tell her all about her job at a Thai restaurant. Spoiler alert, she never stops. After work, Beth goes to her apartment again, now to fix her printer. It seems like every time somebody offers her a drink, she tries to loosen up, but at this part of her story, she is so tense that it is impossible. She is in the bathroom in the next scene when Kendra rushes in and gets to work right behind her. It is only mildly uncomfortable for Beth, of course. A short time later, both girls are comfortably seated on their own couches, drinking their beers, when Beth is asked about her family. And so, the girl gets to speak about it at length with a person who actually listens. As it turns out, apart from taking care of her sick mother, she is forced to provide for a brother who's 35 years old. Robbie seems to have gone through some very dark times throughout his time. He was left at the altar, and after his father died, all meaning left his life. He is trying to get back on his feet through art, however. Nobody knows how that is really going, but Beth is definitely cheering for him. In short, it's not depressing at all. At this moment, Kendra says something interesting as well. Supposedly, she was the first baby to send an email. She is definitely a very important person. Before going home, Beth gets inside a supermarket and does something extremely unexpected. Holding a container full of pasta she cooked last night, she quietly puts it on the shelves. The next day, we see what Beth meant by sexual at work. Down in the warehouse, a young man named Joe approaches her and offers her to come have a drink with the boys after work. Naturally, he is well aware of the fact that Beth is forced to take care of her sick mother, but he simply needs to offer her that to begin a conversation about something. After Beth mentions her responsibilities at home, Joe urges her, in a low tone of voice, to cut loose sometimes and just have some fun. She must be so tired from all that weight she's been carrying for as long as she can remember. Speaking slowly and flirtatiously, Joe gradually draws nearer and nearer, lowering his voice at every step. In the end, he even raises his hand and brushes it across Beth's hair. The girl seems afraid and petrified. Unable to answer anything, she just waits around until Joe gets tired and leaves. Fortunately, someone else enters the room just then, and the session is quickly put to an end. The next day, Beth does the same exact thing with the pasta and calls Kendra from her car. The girl's distant expressions start crashing into the corners of the vehicle, and the rolled eyes are visible on the black screen of the smartphone. As she says, she's currently at a bar with that exact controlling guy she was fighting with before, and of course she is going wild. At this moment, Beth is invited to go hang out with them too, but as expected, the girl says no. Instead, she goes home, watches TV, and hangs out in the kitchen afterward. Her brother comes inside suddenly and scares her witless. This happens quite often, the man coming inside, grabbing an energy drink, and returning to his room. The interaction between them is always dry and short, but this time, Beth decides to test the waters. She wants to know if Robbie is planning to change anything in his life. As expected, the guy feels quite comfortable in his own bubble. He has no intention of facing the world's dangers anymore. This, of course, means that the weight of Beth's responsibilities is never going to be shared. Naturally, this is quite a dark matter to think about, but that night, the girl still manages to steal a glimpse of a smile from her gloomy life. Beth calls her and tells her all about how terrible everything went at the bar. Beth even makes a joke and shows her teeth while laughing. It is a delight to see her being opened up. During the call, Kendra even showed her willingness to visit her apartment and meet her family tomorrow. Naturally, Beth is afraid that her family is going to ruin her new relationship, but who knows? Everything can happen. The most exciting thing that happens at work the next day is Beth's manager asking her to talk to the cleaning lady about a problem with her work. As he says, he cannot do it because he's a white male and she's a black woman. It will just come out wrong and crooked. This new responsibility to cater to someone else's insecurities lands on Beth's shoulder like a light angel, of course. In exchange, she asks for permission to be let go early today. As to the cleaning lady, she didn't receive any complaints about her work that day. With this, the end of the century draws near, and so Beth gradually becomes more and more anxious about it. This is why she decides to take care of the most weird stuff around her apartment. At the end of it all, only one physical danger is left to eliminate. It is a single Lego piece, made by Robbie, that is stationed near the dining table. Beth wants it removed from that place for the night. It just might come out as weird. As expected, Robbie has no intention to move his property, and since there is no time for argument, there's no chance that the Lego piece will not be at the dining table tonight. Just before letting Kendra in, Beth warns her of her family. Whatever happens here tonight, she wants her to promise that she won't turn her back on her because of it. Well, Kendra doesn't promise anything, and so Beth drags through the supper with a body as tense as a bullet. Unfortunately, however, nothing violent happens. There is no conflict, no insults, no raised voices, and nothing that could be considered extremely annoying. It is all just mind-bogglingly weird. First of all, the Lego piece turns out to be a giant representation of the late veteran father. Couple that with Robbie's artistic opinions and the family's interesting way of dealing with demise, and you will receive a supper that could very well be held in another galaxy on some unusual alien planet. As it turns out, the late father had his head frozen. They did it to preserve him until the time of robots came, and they reanimated him again. Ada wants to be frozen after passing as well. One after another, weird stuff like that comes up and pelts Kendra to her complete cognitive burnout. So yes, the supper ends up being quite delightful. When everything ends and the girls find themselves alone in Beth's room, Kendra tells her that it's all fine. As it turns out, she has a violent family, so this is nothing for her. Tonight changed nothing in the way she views Beth. After checking out her countless CDs, she gets comfortable in her bed and gazes up at her with puzzled, mysterious eyes. The conversation about the CDs is over here, and the biggest transition happens in a matter of seconds. Out of nowhere, Kendra reveals to Beth that she has always owned up to what she looks like in the nude. At first, this seems to be an expression of simple human curiosity. Beth always wears unstructured clothes, so nobody can really understand what she looks like beneath them. After sharing this, Kendra takes off her shirt and shoots her an inviting and provocative glare. Beth is already folded inside herself at this point, but now this sudden change forces her to further retreat back into her shell. All tensed up, she averts her eyes and strugglingly reveals that she has never done this before, not even with a man. The next morning, the two went to work together. Walking in the morning cold, Kendra talks about her new position as a cat deliverer. This is pretty much all they discuss on the way, since apparently there's so much to talk about. The first mild problem pops up inside their relationship then. Beth doesn't want Kendra to kiss her in front of the warehouse. If other workers see them, they will probably her about it. Additionally, she's not even sure if she's gay or not. The workday goes as ordinarily as ever, until Beth sees something that creates a new emotion in her heart. Kendra is touching Joe's arm and rolling her eyes like a couple of billiard balls, so the seed of crippling jealousy is born inside Beth's mind. That evening, the girls go to a bar together with a couple of warehouse workers. Seeing Kendra engage in a lengthy conversation with Joe begins to hurt Beth so much that she feels forced to get a drink. Soon, the first glimpses of connection between Kendra and Joe become so obvious that Beth feels as airless as ever, so she simply runs outside for a breather. Her look is boiling from some alien poison when Kendra comes outside after her. Conflict is inevitable here, of course. Kendra doesn't admit to flirting with Joe, of course. She is just having fun, and besides, nothing serious happened last night. At least for her, it wasn't serious. For Beth, last night contained one of the biggest events of her life, but in Kendra's mind, it meant nothing. Beth cooks like a madwoman that night, and is especially reckless when sneaking the containers inside the supermarket. And expectedly enough, she gets caught. Understandably enough, the security is confused. Beth has committed the weirdest crime ever. She did the opposite of stealing. Naturally, there is no paragraph in the Constitution about it, so she cannot possibly be put to jail, but the security still needs her ID to file a report. As Beth says, she doesn't have it on her, so somebody has to bring it in for her. And of course, we all know who that somebody is. Kendra pelts her with questions afterward, but Beth just doesn't want to talk about it. The questions are making her uncomfortable, so changing the subject, she asks her if she wants a ride home. This is when Beth learns something painful. As it turns out, Kendra isn't headed home. She is going over to Joe's tonight. Being a good friend, Beth still returns the favor and gives her a ride. Somehow, it is obvious that Kendra is experiencing something new as well. For the first time in her life, she doesn't feel good about spending a meaningless night with a stranger. The dilemma is written all over her face, but, unfortunately enough, she still chooses to spend the night with Joe. Hours pass, and the worst kind of loneliness pushes itself down on the girl. Pulling her to her knees and stealing all the air from her lungs, forces Beth to think about the only thing that makes her miserable. The crippling sense of loneliness is so all-encompassing and so dominant that the girl is in no mood to talk with anybody, let alone talk with Joe about the way his last night went. Still, however, the young man chooses to keep throwing nails at Beth's mind. Of course, he doesn't know what kind of pain he is causing, so sentence after sentence, he goes on and on about it until Beth tells him to stop. She is quite rude at this moment, so Joe feels an urge to fight back. Until now, Beth must have thought that nothing could hurt more, but when Joe blurts out his next sentence, she feels something evil and uncontrollable coming from her belly and converging her entire body and mind. Joe says that Kendra was right when she said that Beth was crazy. When he leaves, Beth picks up a letter opener and paces after him with eyes full of darkness. It all happens so fast. The girl grapples with Joe and gets on top of him, trying to stab him to his demise, but thankfully Joe manages to save himself until other warehouse workers come to his aid. After this incident, Beth meets with Kendra at the Thai restaurant. Naturally, she wants to know why the girl she loves said all those things about her, but as expected, Kendra thinks she did nothing wrong. Not admitting to making a mistake, she simply says that she just shared some of the stuff that weirded her out. Gaslights are burning, and Beth starts to feel crazy, so she decides to leave this conversation. This is when Kendra runs after her. If she wants to take a step towards making things better, she should apologize right now and promise that this will never happen again. But instead, the girl chooses to do the worst thing possible at this moment. She lets Beth know that after taking her first trip as a cat deliverer, she plans to go on vacation with Joe. Beth simply asks her to stop. She will have no more of this. In the next scene, she is swimming in her own pain when her brother knocks on her door. He is asking for a ride to a local hardware store, and naturally, this is the last thing Beth wants to do. After being sent away rudely, however, Robbie says such a pitiful sorry that Beth's body starts acting all on its own. Standing up, she gets inside her car and takes her brother with her. She would have never expected this, of course, but this simple event makes her feel a lot better. Re-engaging in her old life, she feels safe and cozy. And the weirdest thing of all is that she feels an immeasurable amount of love for Robbie. The two of them get some pancakes in the next scene. After talking warmly about their father, Beth suddenly asks him a very challenging question. She wants to finally know why he still lives at home. At first, Robbie tries to use the usual trick, justifying himself. He empathizes that he's trying to get his art career off the ground, but Beth won't have that answer this time. The brother feels cornered, so he finally breaks and admits that he's afraid of going out into the world again. After sharing this kind of information, however, he deserves to ask some questions as well. Turning the table, he asks her the same thing, and we realize something very interesting. Beth justifying herself living with her mom by saying that she's taking care of her is the same exact thing as Robbie justifying his stay with his art career. Both are scared of the outside world, and deep inside their hearts, they know it very well. Compared to her brother, however, Beth isn't willing to admit it. Instead, she goes to the bathroom and starts scrolling through social media. Unfortunately for Beth, her feed is filled with Joe and Kendra's vacation photos. Those photos must be the main reason why, that night, the girl drank herself to the point of throwing up. Wanting to go anywhere but home, she staggers her way inside the warehouse afterward. After making a note, she locks herself inside the freezer and wakes up to a terrible, dark silence that fills every corner of the building. Fortunately, the note was soon found by the cleaning lady. She finds Beth quite quickly and saves her life. Beth wakes up in the hospital bed in the next scene. Robbie is there when she opens her eyes, and his warm, accepting look makes her feel okay after the worst night of her life. As the brother says, she doesn't have to explain anything to him. Everything is okay. Upon returning home, a delightful surprise filled her heart with even more warmth. Some guys seem to have sent flowers to her as well. Now that the gloom of her life has started to fade away, she can finally get some real rest. Soon, Beth re-engages with her usual way of living with love. Taking care of her responsibilities in this new light, the weight she once felt doesn't seem so heavy anymore. In the next scene, Robbie finally manages to put together an exhibition at an art gallery, and it is actually quite well done. Beth is extremely proud of her brother after seeing it for the first time. All of the pieces are good, but one of them almost brings her to tears. It is a model of their house, filled with dolls that represent their family. Beth feels an irresistible urge to hug her brother after seeing it. As time flows by, fate brings an enormous chasm. Ada passes away, and in accordance with her legal will, her head is frozen too. After visiting the most unusual cemetery in the following scene, she gets back home and dives headfirst into its silence. This silence, however, is soon broken by a knock on the door. It is Beck delivering a box full of sausages to Beth. The man seems quite anxious to meet after a long time. He wants to know how she is and whether she is planning to get back. Not knowing where to take his hands or how to make a good enough joke to make her laugh, he asks her out then. His body seems tense then, but when Beth says yes, the man draws a deep sigh of joy. His happiness is so huge that he even hugs Beth before leaving. It's not uncomfortable at all, of course. When the girl gets back inside, she checks the sausage box and finds a letter inside. As it turns out, the delivery is from Kendra.